So what I thought I'd do, just while I try and figure out what on earth is going on with this, is I'd read a bit of my book. So No Adults Allowed is a book I wrote a few years back, and then I put it out in this paperback version in 2022, I think. Does that sound right? This was my lockdown book when I originally wrote it. So yeah, I'm just going to read the first chapter. So yeah, this is part 1 of the book called The New World. And the first chapter is called 29, which is mysterious and makes more sense when you read the actual thing. So here we go. Every day, a perfect adventure. Running through the forest, diving from the top of the waterfall, exploring the depths of the caves, rafting across the black lake, gliding from the heights back down to the village nestled in the valley. The challenge, Harry found, was in thinking of something new. Adding a twist to an old favourite did the trick. Riding a raft off the edge of the waterfall, or leaping from the cliffs without a glider and trusting that the trees would catch him. Today was a hunt day. Harry had decided that a celebration was needed, for no other reason than the sun had shone for 5 glorious days in a row. It seemed as good a justification as any. Not that he needed much. Somewhere in the woods there would be a deer or a boar, and they'd be set for a memorable feast. If they were lucky, it might even be better than the previous week's festivities. "It's chilly this morning," Robin said, holding his arms to his chest as they trudged over the uneven ground of the forest, the canopy high above swaying gently as a layer of mist drifted through its leaves. A small creature with a curling tail leaped from one branch to another, too skinny for a squirrel, so perhaps a monkey of some sort. They'd seen more of them that summer than ever before, coming up from the south. At least that's what Eva said, and she knew about these things. To Harry, a monkey was a monkey. They were funny, so he was glad they had started showing up, but he didn't much care where they came from or where they were going. The only important fact for Harry and for the monkey was that they were too small to be worth hunting. A film of moisture lay damp across every surface, every leaf and branch, every strand of cobweb. Even the mulch beneath their feet was covered by an intricate blanket of tiny droplets of water dispersed with each footstep. It was as if the world was still half asleep, waiting for a moment before thrusting off her drowsiness and beginning the day proper. That promise, poised and waiting to happen, made the early morning Harry's favourite part of the day. It's why he got up earlier than the others, often walking around Cragside or out into the forest or across the fields before anyone else was awake. Those quiet solo explorations weren't always possible. Despite Robin sharing his enthusiasm for exploration, the boy nevertheless insisted on tagging along, intruding obliviously upon Harry's world. Harry would attempt to creep out of the village unseen, wincing as Robin all too often poked his head out of his yurt and waved. The boy certainly had an appreciation of the forest and their good fortune. He was more fervent in his outlook than almost anyone in the camp, never missing an opportunity to visit the temple or to repeatedly share its teachings with anybody carelessly within earshot. But he exhibited it with an intense reverence that Harry found awkward and not entirely trustworthy. Harry saw the valley as existing for them to enjoy, yet Robin behaved as if it was a delicate and fragile thing, always fearing that it would crumble at the lightest touch. It sometimes seemed that Robin accompanied him on the hunts more to keep an eye on his behaviour than contribute anything useful. Despite all that, Harry had recognised years ago that Robin would do pretty much anything he was asked, as if he was trying to live vicariously through Harry's eyes. Perhaps that would change as they both got older. There was a rustle of movement up ahead, and Harry paused, holding out a hand to slow Robin's steps. "Is it a deer?" the boy asked, peering past Harry's shoulder. "I think so," Harry said, leaning towards the foliage to get a good look while lifting the bow from his shoulder. "Go round to the left," he said, pointing. "Block its escape route that way. Drive it towards me if you can." He pulled an arrow from the quiver on his back and knocked it into place. He'd made a promise to everyone back home that there would be a feast, and he wasn't intending to break it. Food was always plentiful, but roasted fresh meat was needed to create a sense of occasion. Harry was always looking for ways to stop the days all blending together. He could see a shape, A shadow, really, skulking through the undergrowth. The snapping of twigs and the crunching of leaves. Harry was poised, his senses sharp, the muscles in his arms and legs tight as he readied himself. The cry of surprise from Robin gave him only a moment's warning that the animal was on the move, and it wasn't a deer. Flinging himself sideways, he glimpsed the thick black fur and flashing teeth of the wolf as it lunged, missing him by inches, and they both tumbled into the bushes. Scrambling to his feet, Harry brought his bow up only moments before the wolf was upon him again, its fangs biting down into the curved frame of the weapon instead of his arm, narrowly missing his fingers. Releasing the bow, he let the wolf's momentum carry it over and behind him, where the beast landed in a heap. Not waiting to see what it would do next, Harry was up and running, his legs powering him through the forest, bashing branches aside as he ran. These were the moments that made life worth living. He felt the undulations of the forest through his feet, riding the curves of the land like a bird on the wind. The forest was part of him. He could sense its every subtlety, never falling even while he rushed and leaped over tangles of roots and vines on the very edge of being out of control. He glanced over his shoulder. The wolf was there, teeth bared and snapping, its eyes small and focused. Harry was no longer the most dangerous creature in the forest. Grinning, knowing what was to come, he cut a path through the trees, drawing the wolf out and leaving Robin far behind, trampling a route as best he could. Every branch he pushed aside left an easier pursuit for the wolf. He could feel its breath close behind, as if it was right by his neck, its jaws clacking at his heels. The ground became increasingly uneven, dropping away into abrupt ditches and gullies, huge slabs of rock protruding up from the ground and lifting free of the tree cover. Blue skies overhead, with a brief speckling of cloud. The mists were clearing already, and it was going to be a beautiful day. Recognizing his surroundings from the thinning tree line and the cracked rocks and earth underfoot, his grin widened yet further. There it was, the sound of rushing water, its roar growing louder by the second. The wolf skittered over the rocks, its paws less effective than on the leaves and dirt of the forest floor. Pushing through a final cluster of slender trees, their branches thin and bending, Harry felt the ground vanish beneath him as he stepped out over nothing. The cliff dropped away and he fell, feet flailing, briefly aware of the waterfall to one side and the wolf falling to the other. The animal followed him off the edge, yapping as it tumbled in space. Harry reached out for the expected assistance, and there it was, a vine dangling just within reach, in the right place, at the right time. He grabbed it, the palms of his hands burning as he held tight, sliding down, trying to secure his hold. One end of the vine snapped, and his stomach lurched as he swung low and wide, skimming the cliff face as his momentum and trajectory took him back up to near the top of the waterfall on the other side. Releasing the vine at the last second, he grasped onto the rocky side of the cliff, fingers searching for firm holds. Pulling himself hand over hand, feet scrabbling for purchase, he finally reached the top of the cliff, breathing heavily, the spray of the river's edge wetting his hair as he got to his feet. Taking a breath, he turned to take in the view laid out before him, the valley below with the lake, surrounded by forests rolling over the tall hills as far as he could see. In the river below he could just make out a dark speck as the wolf was washed away. Harry held up his arms and let out a cry of victory, which echoed back to him from the hills. Flick sat on a branch on the opposite side of the ravine. She'd been there since dawn, watching the sun creep up over the horizon to illuminate the rolling tree-covered hills. Cragside was just visible below, though only the very tips of the yurts, as well as the roof of the grand old ruins in the side of the cliff. Flick liked to keep an eye on the village, to make sure it was there, that there were people going about their business. Still people in the world. Frantic shaking of branches across from her perch, past the waterfall, immediately caught her attention. There was something large moving through the bushes at speed. A moment later, the idiot boy from the village, Harry, erupted out of the trees, flinging himself off the ledge. Flick sighed. He was always pulling stupid stunts, always pushing to see how far he could test the environment. And predictably, he was able to grasp hold of a convenient vine and swing himself to safety. Flick didn't remember seeing that tangle of vines earlier, though she couldn't be sure. One day the boy's luck would run out, she was sure of it, and then there'd really be trouble. Harry, self-styled hero of the village, who could do no wrong and was loved by all. A large wolf tumbled out of the undergrowth in pursuit, finding itself far less fortunate as it spun, end over end, to its death on the rocks below. Flick watched as its blood trickled out and stained the river water, before the body slid into the torrent and was pushed downstream. Another wolf then, and the biggest yet. They were getting bolder, as were all the new animals migrating up from the south. She might only be 12, but she remembered far enough back to know that monkeys swing between the trees in this part of the world was not normal. Something must have changed somewhere. She picked at a scab on her knee, one of many. Her clothes were starting to get a little ragged, which meant she'd have to venture into the village to pick up replacements soon. Never a fun time. Hopefully, nobody would see her. That's the end of the first chapter. That was the first chapter of No Adults Allowed, which is a story that I serialized in 2020 and then turned into a paperback, which you can get on Amazon if you want to. It's the only serial I've actually managed to do that with, where I actually got round to turning it into a book. It's something I should do with all my serials, of course, because there's a lot of people who don't want to read a book in a serial form through a newsletter, or this one went out on Wattpad back in the day. So yeah, if I was more business savvy and had magical extra time, then I'd convert everything into a book. But as it is, that's the only one so far. Thanks for watching. I hope that was entertaining. I will see you again at some point in the future. Okay, have a good day, everyone.